Hi, I'm Jenna, also known as the Transplanted Country Girl. I come from upstate New York. I live right about a quarter of a mile in from Lake Ontario, and I am a special education teacher. I teach where my kids go to school in the same district, so that's always a very interesting experience. They come to school with me in the morning, and I pick them up from their school at the end of the day. So it's always a really good time to have all my students know my children. Right now, we are social distancing, so we haven't been in school for I think 5 weeks. This might be our going into our fifth week now, and it's been interesting. It's been difficult, but we're trying to make the best of it. We're having trying to have a good time. But I've been doing a lot of filming and a lot of Zoom chats and using a lot of technology. And I've always wanted to film a knitting podcast, and I thought that this would be a great time to do that now because I'm kind of in front of the camera all the time lately. So I thought I'd give that a try. So here I am. I guess I should start with my name. Um, I go by Transplanted Country Girl because I was from a suburb that was busy and everybody lived, 10 feet apart. And when I met my now husband, he lived in a very similar situation. And he said, I want to live out in the middle of nowhere. At the time, we were both working in the city where we live, the city close to where we live, Rochester. And he just said, I just want to get out of here at the end of the night. And I said, okay. So he moved me way out, about a half hour outside of Rochester. And we are in the country on 5 acres with our twin boys, Augie and Anthony. And yeah, it's a good time. So I just went by Transplanted Country Girl because I feel like I've just been plopped into the country. I was not thrilled about living in the country initially, but here we are now. Um, I love to knit. It's sort of what I'm known for. I'm knitting all the time on my break at school. When I'm watching my kids play sports, I'm always knitting. So it's just sort of my thing. And I watch a ton of knitting podcasts, and I always think I would like to do that. So here I am. Um, I guess the best place to start is the beginning. My grandmother taught me how to knit when I was 11. She is still living. She's 95. Her birthday, no, she's 94. Her birthday is in July. She'll be 95. And I just really wanted to learn how to knit. And she taught me on the really big, long metal needles because that was all she knew how to knit on. I don't even think she knew of circular needles at that time. And so she taught me. And now when I'm knitting something, I will bring it over to her house and I always make her knit stitches into what I'm knitting. And I take pictures because I just want to remember the love that she's put into everything that I knit, although we can't see her right now because, we're all social distancing and she's old and we don't want to get anybody sick. My grandfather is still living too. He actually turned 99 in March. So we can't visit them right now and we're very upset about that, but we go and we wave through the window. So anyway, when I was 11 and I learned how to knit, I would just knit, ridiculous blocks of nothing. I didn't know how to even cast on or cast off. I just knew how to do the stitches. So I wouldn't say I really did anything then. But as I got older, I she taught me how to cast on and cast off, and I did things like Afghans, and I wouldn't even do because I didn't even know anything about circular needles at that time. So I would knit like a long rectangle and another one and another, four of them, and I would hand sew them together. I've come a long way since then. Actually, my first Afghan I was knitting for a boyfriend at the time, and when we broke up, I ripped it right off of his bed and I took it, and then I decided I was going to give it to one of my brothers for Christmas. So then I felt bad I didn't have something for my other brother that was handmade. So I made a similar Afghan for him. And they both still use them to this day, which I think is really funny. Um, and I used to teach in the city of Rochester. And one of my aides that worked in my classroom she was really big into crocheting and she was really good at that. And she taught me basic things. She really tried to teach me a granny square. Forget it. Maybe I could do it better now because I'm a more experienced like knitter. But I could not figure that out at the time. But anyway, she said to me one day, have you ever heard of Susan B. Anderson? And I had no idea what she was talking about. And she said, you have to get this book. And so I started with the Itty Bitty Hats, which I'm sure everybody at this point has seen. That came out in 2006. But when I first saw the patterns in the book, I was like, I have to knit every single thing in this book. So I started knitting all the hats. I didn't have kids at the time. I wasn't married. I wasn't getting married. I just, what, no prospects for children at that point, but I'm like, I have to knit every single one of these hats. I love them. So, yeah, I just started knitting them. So I thought I would start by showing you some of those hats that I knit. There were tons and tons of them in this book. If you haven't, well, you'll see some of these, but if you've never seen this book and you're really interested in knitting hats for kids, that's I would say a really good place to start. Um, some of them I'm not even sure if they were in the book anymore. I followed so many of her patterns. Here was a little football one, like a little doodad on top. Loved that one. Oh, I guess I should start. I should say that I only knit with acrylic at that time because I knew nothing about yarn. I remember my current husband. Well, I've only had one husband, but I remember my husband Augie taking me into a yarn shop one time, and the yarns were all like $30, and I'm like, I would never pay $30 for a skein of yarn. Is this lady crazy? Fast forward to now. Yeah. So yeah, next hat, there's a little plum one with the little leaves. So cute. It had a little roll bottom, which I don't even really like on a hat now, but this is how I really learned how to knit. Um, she just did so much with teaching you how to knit in the round, teaching you how to use double pointed needles, and increasing, uh, making one, and little I cord stems, different things like that. Just simple things, little roll bottom, just basic hats. Little pear looking, or green apple, I guess you could say. I learned how to change colors. I just remember learning a ton of techniques, like a little old fashioned football helmet one. This one I learned how to do a seed stitch. I started to get good enough where I don't, maybe I did follow a pattern for this. I can't even remember. This is so many years ago now. Um, I may have done this myself. It may have been from a pattern. I always loved her decreases, how her decreases look when you get, towards the top end of the top of the hat. But that was a little dinosaur hat. And again, I was knitting these with no child. I just wanted to knit them all. The little like zebra looking hat. I know it's kind of hard to see. It's dark behind me. Um, just a little like sack hat that tied at the top, little I cords. Get some different stitches, some seed stitches. But really, I had only known garter for a very long time, garter and stockinette. I remember seeing this one and loved it. And my mother kept saying, well, what if you don't have a little girl? And I was like, of course I'm going to have a little girl. Are you kidding? Fast forward to now, and I have two boys and no little girls. I remember seeing all these newborn hats, and they would put a little naked newborn laying down, and they would have one of these really cute little hats on. And I was like, oh, have to make those. So I found the pattern and made a million of these. And then I ended up getting married and getting pregnant with my boys, and I'm like, oh, they have to have a million hats. So some things like these I just kind of did on my own, and they wore. Like I said, they're twins. They're 8 years old now. I don't really make them hats very much, although I did just make them hats for Christmas. Um, they wore these a lot when they were really little, and it's funny, they look so small to me now. I didn't have a pattern for these. I just kind of, we're a big baseball family. So I used to sit and watch my husband play baseball, and I was knitting these while he was playing the baseball game, and I was hand stitching all the baseball red stitching on there. And they wore these. There's actually a really funny story with these. So I knit these for the boys, and they were really small still at Father's Day because they were born in February, and they were born a month. Actually, they were born 6 weeks early because I had preeclampsia, and all of that. I'm sure I'll tell you that story another time. But I put them both. My husband has gigantic hands, so his baseball mitts are gigantic. So I one day he was gone at work. He used to work a 3 to 11 shift. He's in law enforcement, and I got two of his mitts, and I put the boys just in their diapers, and I put these little hats on them. And at the time, they were so big on them because their little heads were so small. And I put each of them inside, sitting inside of his mitts, and I'm like, this is going to be the greatest Father's Day picture ever. So I stuck them in the baseball mitts, and I put their little hats on. and they were hysterically crying. And I could not get them to just sit right or just be normal in this picture. So it ended up being the funniest Father's Day picture that if I ever learn how to insert a picture, I will put that in because it's so funny. You know, one is like all scooched down because he was so mad, and the other one's hysterically crying. They're both crying, but they have little hats on, and it just it makes us laugh now when we look back at it. Um, these were two of my absolute favorite Susan B. Anderson hats. The little oh, how about I go the right way? The little snowman ones with the carrot nose and the little black top hat and the little red scarf. They wore these. Oh, I love those. And they also wore, oh, let's see if I can find those in a minute. Where'd they go? Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Oh, here they are. They wore these for years and years and years, so much so that they used to pull the pom poms off and they're just sort of dangling now. And they would pull little pieces out of them because for years they would wear their little Santa hats at Christmas time, and they like stretched just enough where I could get them on their little heads. There was no, I don't think it was a pattern. I just started decreasing the way I thought it would work, and I thought they came out really cute. I loved those little hats, and they wore those for years for Christmas. I think I even made them two sets somewhere. Oh, my babies. And then this might have been a Susan B. Anderson. This was a little bigger. She always had things like this, and of course, my kids had to tug on everything because that's what little kids do. So both of those have been just about tugged out. And again, everything was with acrylic because I didn't know any different. Although I don't really hate acrylic, I think there's certain things that you should knit with acrylic, like slippers, that I'll get to in a second. I don't understand a $30 skein of yarn for something that's going to drag across your floor, but to each his own. Um, Little fall hats that I made them, that once I put them on their head, I was like, these seem kind of girly, so they never wore them, but they were cute, or maybe once, but then never again. These were my favorites. I loved these. They're little pumpkin hats. I have really cute picture of them. They were still small at Halloween, small enough that if we got pumpkins that were big enough, we hollowed the pumpkins out, put two little leg holes in, and stuck them inside of the pumpkins. And we put a towel inside because we thought it would be like wet and gross, and they wouldn't like it, which of course they didn't. And of course, hysterically crying with their little pumpkin hats on, sitting in their pumpkins. But we did get some without them crying. Some of my very favorite pictures. Um, and I've made a bunch of these for friends who had children. And that was a really cute Susan B. Anderson pattern. I love that one. And then these were ones that they wore pretty much all the time. My friend who was a big crocheter, she crocheted the center part for me with the thing one and thing two. Um, I think I stitched the thing one and thing two, but she crocheted the outer edges. They wore these probably for 2 years. Um, and I can't believe they're even in this good of shape. The little pom poms, they didn't rip those off. Their whole first birthday theme was Dr. Seuss, so everything was thing one and thing two. And their first Halloween costumes, I took like a big blue boa that was this color, and I made wigs for them. And they had thing one and thing two shirts, super cute. So that was these, and again, wore these for I think 2 years. When they were really little, somebody gave me hats that had their names on them, which was really helpful because I would be driving and they would be backward and somebody would start crying, and I had those little mirrors up in the back of the car. Somebody would start crying and I didn't know who it was, so I would have to look at the little name on the hat. I could tell them apart, but when we were driving, I wouldn't remember who I put where. So that was the names on the hats were really helpful. So this year for Christmas, I said to them, I really don't ever knit them things. They're not interested. They don't really wear sweaters. My husband, I don't think he's ever worn a sweater in his life. He is like a sweatshirt, t-shirt, shorts in the winter, camo pants at all times, camo shorts. No, he would not wear a sweater. That's not going to happen. If we go to a wedding, he won't even wear like a sport jacket. Anyway, I said to the boys, do you want me to knit you anything for Christmas this year? And they said hats. They wanted a hat and they wanted slippers. So again, acrylic, because I knew they were never going to wear these slippers. I think they wore them once. I just used a really basic slipper pattern. I don't even know what it's called. I think like everyday slippers. So they each got little Augie one and red ones. Here's this little red one. I think this gold one. Nothing fancy, just stitch up toe. Anthony wanted orange ones, which I guess are a little dirtier on the bottom. Maybe he did wear them a little bit. It's very strange. I will find these like in their bed. They don't they don't want to wear them, but they sleep with them in their bed. They get funny about things like that. They do funny things like that. They crack me up. Um, so that was really the very beginning of my knitting journey. Um, actually, oh, here it is. Oh, I forgot about these. So then I saw somebody make a sleep sack for little kids, and I was like, oh, I love that idea. So I made a bunch of these like sacks, which really I didn't leave it in the end, that you can put a little kid in it to you swaddle them and stick them in the sack to keep them warm. I loved this one. It was just obviously scrap yarn, and I just made it all different. I don't think I even had a pattern. I think I just started sort of like a hat and increased as I went. I made a whole bunch of those, and I would make little hats that matched, just depending on how big the child was going to be. It was like a little blanket. And the best part is I made a ton of them, and I loved making them. And again, I practiced a lot of different techniques, but never put one of my children in one. I did make this one like an ice cream cone, and I thought that was just the cutest thing ever. Now that I look at it, having had kids, this thing is gigantic, but I just thought it was the cutest thing ever. So I made it. Um, so that took me into almost to now. I found, I can't remember when the pattern came out, the big herringbone cowl pattern from Pearl Soho. Um, Actually, I was just in New York City right before this whole pandemic started. I was in New York City in February, and I went to Pearl Soho for the first time. And I don't know why I felt obligated to tell the girl at Pearl Soho that I knit about 10 to 12 of the gigantic big herringbone cowls, which are these. And again, still somewhat in my beginnings. So it's made out of just acrylic, like those gigantic skeins of yarn, which I'm not going to lie, I still really love those. They're soft. I think they hold up really well. This was my first knitting experience with herringbone. Um, it was kind of tedious, but I really liked the finished product. I never blocked it in these days because I don't even think I knew anything about blocking at that point, or maybe it would say block it, and I was like, I'm not doing that. The one thing I can say about herringbone that I don't love, I would say I'm a pretty good knitter. For some reason, I have a really hard time, like undoing my mistakes and figuring out like where I made a mistake. I just don't. I'm not very good about that with this pattern. I guess I could put it on so you can see it. It is one you kind of have to like fiddle with quite a bit to get it how you want it. Um, but and I like both sides, the right side and the wrong side. I just wear it however. I actually just made a whole bunch of these for my girlfriends for Christmas. It was the first year we had ever really done Christmas gifts for each other since we were young. We've been friends since grade school, long time. And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm gonna make my girlfriends Christmas presents. So I decided to do that, and I started making all these cowls, and I was doing a whole Pinterest thing, and I was talking to one of my friends who I now call my knitting friend, who at the time was she not at the time, she still is one of my students. It was her mother, and we became very good friends. And so now she's my knitting friend because we do all knitting things together. Um, but I was on Pinterest one day, and up pops the Andrea Mowry night shift, um, the night shift shawl cowl. I'm not exactly sure what that's called now. And I just saw it and was like, I have to make that. And at this point, I wouldn't say I was like the greatest knitter or very advanced, but this was last year, in January of last year, and I saw it and like that, I absolutely have to make this. Um, and I remember I sent her name, my friend is Rhonda. I sent Rhonda a picture, and I'm like, I have to make this. And she's like, well, let's make this together. She's like, all right, let's do it. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I guess I shouldn't say that. It ended up being okay, but there were definitely parts that I struggled with. Um, okay, sorry about that. My son popped his head in. It's very hard to do this with the boys around because they get a little wild. But anyway, Andrew Mowry, night shift. Nothing new to anybody, I'm sure. This has been around for a little while now. Um, and again, I had just really gotten back into knitting. I didn't know a ton about, oh, I shouldn't say I didn't know a ton, but I didn't really know anything about yarn at that point. And so went to acrylic. Actually, when I looked at her pattern, I had looked up the spin cycle at the time, and I was like, "Ooh, that's pricey. This thing is going to cost like $180 or something," and I just wasn't going to do it. Um, and so I got one skein of the yarn, and I got Devilish Grin, and I didn't know how funny spin cycle yarn is. I don't funny is maybe the wrong word. I didn't know how different every single skein is. And when I got that skein, which I still have and haven't used, it was very, very washed out. It was very light. It was almost pink. And in the picture, it looks really red and very bold and vibrant. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work. That's not what I like. And so I sort of learned my lesson with spin cycle yarn at that point. Um, which we'll get to that again in a minute. So I, again, grabbed acrylic, just a bunch of different colors that I liked. I wanted it to be sort of fall-like. I didn't know the pattern. I followed exactly how she wanted the pattern to be. So um, I started that whole beginning in one color. I might have even made a mistake or messed that up. I remember at the time I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that whole section that way. But when you wear it now, it doesn't necessarily matter because when it's wrapped around, you don't really see it like that. Um, I've worn this a ton, a ton. I still wear it. It's okay. Acrylic doesn't bother me. I know lots of people do the whole yarn snob thing. I'm not a yarn snob. It doesn't bother me. I'll wear it. I love it. It's really warm. It's really cozy. It's held up really well. And then I went to Rhinebeck this year. We went to India Untangled, and Spin Cycle was there. I knew they were going to be there, and I had saved up money, and I was all ready to go. And I ran right to the booth, and there weren't even a lot of people in the booth. I was so excited, and I grabbed a whole bunch. I grabbed a Devilish Grin in the color that looked really good to me. Um, and it was just nice. Like it was nice that I think Spin Cycle is just one of those things you have to really buy in person. I have ordered from them and it's come okay. I don't know what happened. Maybe I just had like one really bad experience. But over Christmas of 2019, this past Christmas, um, I got a few more skeins and I decided to make another night shift. So I used all of the colors that Andrea Maurer used, with the exception of I put the Devilish Grin in, and I don't believe she used that. I can't think of the one that she used that I didn't use. Um, that. I get tons and tons of compliments on this from non-knitters because it's just really colorful and it's just not something that you see all the time. I found the pattern to be much easier the second time, but I had almost a year of knitting under my belt of like good going strong knitting. And I had learned a ton of techniques over the past year. So this one really flew off my needles. I think I did it in a couple of days. We had 2 weeks off for Christmas break this year. And I remember I sat and watched Outlander and I knit this. I think I watched the first 3 seasons and just straight through and just knit Outlander. And in upstate New York, it's very cold. It's very snowy, tons of snow, tons of uh, just wind, especially where we are because we're in the country. Um, and so my boys just kind of played in the living room while I binge watched that and knit this. But it is one of my very favorites. Um, and so that is that. So I just wanted to test out podcasting for the first time. This isn't an overly long video, but it's a great beginning. I will be recording more. It doesn't look like we will be going back to school this year, I don't think. Governor Cuomo right now has us shut down until May 15th, and they said even after that, it will take 6 weeks for people to be back in school. And at that point, our school year would be over, which is really sad because we had an awesome, awesome group of kids this year. I actually have my friend Rhonda's second child this year, her second daughter. So I feel really, really bad that the year I think is over. We take our fifth graders overnight camping, and that trip looks like that's not going to happen. So definitely some things that we're upset about that aren't going to happen. But we're still doing a lot of really fun things and trying to make it fun for the kids. And um, yeah, it's bittersweet, but I thought this would be a really good time to start doing this. Um, and that's it. So I'll try another one soon. Thanks for stopping by and come back again.